Right now, as you sit in the comfort of your room, listening to this story, there's something you probably don't realize. Someone, somewhere, might already know your schedule. They might know what time you leave for work, which bus you take, when you walk your dog, or even which light you leave on in your house at night. They might know your face, your voice, your smile, better than you know theirs, because you've never really seen them. And that's how stalking begins. Tonight, you're going to hear true stalker stories that left victims terrified. Real people, real danger, and the kind of fear you can't just laugh off when the story ends, because these aren't about ghosts or legends. They're about flesh and blood. These are stories of people who learned, the hard way, that you don't need a haunted house to feel hunted. All it takes is someone obsessed with you, someone who has decided that your life, your movements, your very existence belongs to them. By the time you finish this video, you'll understand why victims say that a stalker's silence is often scarier than their words, because silence means they're watching, and when you finally hear them, it's already too late. There's a reason stalker stories feel so much more disturbing than other kinds of horror. When you hear a ghost story, you can reassure yourself, it's not real, it's just a legend. When you watch a slasher film, you know it's actors on a set. But stalkers? They exist in every city, every neighborhood, every street. And unlike monsters in the movies, they don't wear masks. They look ordinary. They smile. They shake your hand. They might even be standing behind you in line at the grocery store. Victims describe the fear like this. It's not just being followed, it's the crushing weight of never being alone, of knowing that your phone, your front door, your own mirror could be the places they're watching from. In the stories you're about to hear, you'll meet people who faced that exact nightmare. A woman who discovered her stalker wasn't a stranger at all, but the neighbor living just a few feet away, waiting for the right moment. A college student whose every step was tracked, not by footsteps on the street, but by her phone, hacked and controlled by someone who never even had to leave their house. And a man who thought his stalker's obsession was harmless, until the night he woke up to find them inside his bedroom, knife in hand. These are stories of obsession, intrusion, and the razor-thin line between fascination and violence. And the scariest part? Most stalkers never look like villains. They look like coworkers, classmates, even friends. Ordinary people with one extraordinary desire: control. You might think, this couldn't happen to me. But the truth is, stalkers prey on that illusion. They thrive on routines. They count on you not noticing the small things. A car that always seems to be parked near yours. A social media account that likes every post at odd hours. A knock on your door with no one there. Victims often realize too late that the signs were always there. By the time the puzzle pieces fit together, the stalker is already inside their world, knowing things they shouldn't know, touching objects they shouldn't touch, waiting in places you thought were safe. This isn't a campfire scare. This is real horror. Because stalkers don't disappear when the story ends. Even after arrests, restraining orders, or confrontations, many victims report the same thing. They never feel safe again. Every late-night knock, every unknown number, every set of footsteps on the sidewalk can send their heart racing. That's the psychological scar stalking leaves behind. And maybe that's what makes these stories so unforgettable. Unlike monsters, stalkers don't vanish with the morning sun. They wait, they linger. They remind us that sometimes the scariest thing in the world is someone who simply refuses to go away. Now it's time to step into their world, the victims who lived through the worst nights of their lives and survived to tell their stories. Stories of obsession, stories of invasion, stories of terror that follows you into your home, into your phone, into your dreams. And as you listen, ask yourself one question: would you know if someone was watching you? Or would you only realize it the night they finally stepped out of the shadows? This is the first story. Before we start, please click that like and subscribe button to get more stories like this. The neighbor who never left. She thought she knew her neighborhood. She thought she knew the faces on her street. But she didn't realize until it was almost too late that the person she feared most was living just a few feet away. Her name was Emily, a 26-year-old teacher who had just moved into a small rental house in a quiet suburb, the kind of street where kids rode bikes until sunset and neighbors waved from their porches. But almost immediately, Emily noticed things she brushed off as paranoia. A shadow moving past her window just as she turned off the lights. A cigarette butt left on her back porch, even though she didn't smoke. The sound of someone walking behind her car late at night. At first, she laughed at herself. It's just my imagination. New house jitters. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew. One evening, as Emily watered the plants in her kitchen window, she felt it. Eyes on her. She turned quickly, expecting to see a passerby on the sidewalk. Instead, she caught a man standing perfectly still near the edge of her fence, his face half hidden in the dark. When she gasped, he simply smiled and raised a hand like he'd been caught doing something innocent. Then he turned and walked back toward his house. Her heart pounded. She recognized him. He was her neighbor, a man named Dave, in his 40s, who lived 2 doors down. She had exchanged polite greetings with him once, nothing more. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling he had been standing there much longer than she noticed. Over the next few weeks, the incidents escalated. She'd come home from work to find her curtains slightly open when she was sure she left them closed. Her back gate would be unlatched. Once she found muddy boot prints leading right up to her bedroom window, and every time she saw her neighbor Dave, he'd smile. That same smile she had seen the first night, calm, ordinary, as if daring her to say something. Emily started sleeping with a chair propped against her bedroom door. She told herself she was overreacting. After all, she had no proof. But then came the notes. One morning, she found a folded piece of paper tucked under her welcome mat. On it, in neat handwriting, were the words, "You look beautiful when you read by the window." Her stomach dropped. She did read by the window, but only at night, alone. The next note came 2 days later. Blue dress again. My favorite. And then, don't close the blinds. I like to see you. Emily's hands shook as she held the paper. This wasn't random. This wasn't harmless. Someone was watching her every move inside her own home. Emily called the police. Officers came, took statements, and agreed the notes were disturbing. But without fingerprints, without direct proof, they couldn't make an arrest. They suggested cameras, stronger locks, a security system. Emily installed them all. She even asked a friend to stay over. But 2 nights later, she woke to the sound of her friend whispering from the couch. "Someone's on the porch." Emily crept to the window. There, in the glow of the porch light, stood her neighbor Dave, his face pressed against the glass, his breath fogging the pane. And when he noticed her watching, he didn't flinch. He just smiled. She called 911. This time, police arrived before he left. When they searched him, they found a small notebook in his jacket. Inside were pages and pages of observations. What time Emily left the house, what she ate for dinner, what she wore to bed. The officers described it as a diary of obsession. Dave was arrested and charged with stalking. He was banned from returning to his home on that street. But even with him gone, Emily said the damage was permanent. She moved to a new town, changed her phone number, even dyed her hair. Still, she admitted years later, "I can't sit by a window anymore, not without feeling like someone's out there watching." And that's what makes stalker stories so terrifying. They don't always end in violence. Sometimes, the real horror is the silence, the watching, the smile on the other side of the glass. Emily learned the truth too late. Sometimes the person you fear isn't hiding in the shadows at all. Sometimes they live right next door. This is the first story, and it's only the beginning. The digital shadow. Once upon a time, stalkers had to follow their victims in person. They had to linger outside windows, sit in parked cars, or lurk in alleyways. But today, technology has given them a new weapon. They don't need to leave their house. They can follow you through your phone, your laptop, your social media. They can sit in silence, knowing every move you make. And sometimes, you don't realize you're being watched until it's too late. Her name was Kayla, a college sophomore who loved posting about her life online. Photos of her morning coffee, study sessions with friends, late-night selfies under fairy lights in her dorm. It started small. She noticed one account, an anonymous profile, liking every photo within seconds of posting. At first she thought it was harmless. Everyone had fans. But then came the comments. Not creepy, not yet, just specific. "That latte looks good. Oat milk again? Hope your chem lab goes better today. Blue pajamas tonight? Cute." Kayla froze when she read that last one, because no one could know what she wore to bed. unless they were there or watching. She deleted the account, blocked it. But another appeared the next day, and another. Then her texts started acting strange. Her phone would light up with messages from numbers she didn't recognize. "Nice walk today." "That guy you smiled at in the library, he's not right for you." Kayla panicked. She turned off location services, deleted apps, but the messages kept coming. And one night when she returned from class, she found a note slipped under her door. It read, "You don't need to post anymore. I already see you." Kayla confided in her roommate, who suggested they check her phone for spyware. A tech-savvy friend found it within minutes, a hidden tracking app buried under fake settings. Whoever installed it had complete access, texts, photos, even the microphone. Kayla's stomach dropped. She hadn't left her phone unattended with strangers, only friends, classmates, people she trusted. And then she remembered, a week before it all began, she had dropped her phone at a party. A guy had picked it up, handed it back with a smile and said, "Don't worry, I got you." She hadn't thought about him since. Now she realized he hadn't just handed it back. He'd claimed it. That night, Kayla turned off her phone and placed it in the freezer, hoping the signal would die. But as she sat on her bed, heart pounding, she heard something else. A knock. She froze. Her roommate was out. No one was supposed to be there. Then a voice came through the crack. "Why'd you turn it off? I can't see you anymore." Her blood ran cold. The voice wasn't in her phone. It was outside her door. Kayla called campus security, whispering into her roommate's phone. By the time officers arrived, the hallway was empty. But outside, under the glow of a street lamp, they found him, the man from the party. In his backpack, a laptop, binoculars, and a folder full of printed screenshots of Kayla's posts. The tracking app traced back to his email. He had been inside her phone for weeks, watching, listening, cataloging every detail of her life. He was arrested, but Kayla's fear didn't end there. Even after the arrest, Kayla couldn't shake the feeling. She deleted all her social media, changed phones, moved dorms, but she said the worst part wasn't what he did. It was what she realized. He didn't need to break into my house. He didn't need to touch me. He was already inside my life, inside my head. And for weeks, I let him in without even knowing it. Every time her new phone buzzes, every time she sees a stranger glance at her screen in public, she feels it again, that chilling certainty that she's being watched, and maybe she still is. That was the second story, but the next one proves obsession doesn't always stop at the window or the screen. Sometimes it comes crashing through the door. The obsession that turned violent. Most stalker stories build in shadows, notes, messages, glimpses from across the street. But sometimes obsession doesn't stay outside. Sometimes it kicks down the door, and when that happens, survival comes down to seconds. Her name was Sarah. She was 29, living alone in a small apartment after leaving a long, toxic relationship. It started with calls at night, silent at first, just breathing. She hung up, rolled her eyes, told herself it was a prank. But then came the voicemails. Dozens of them. A man's voice whispering, "I miss you. I forgive you. We belong together." The voice was familiar. Her ex. Sarah had left him months before. She thought it was over, but he had been waiting, feeding his obsession, growing bolder with every day she stayed silent. She changed her number, blocked him everywhere. But he always found a way back in, a new number, a new account. A letter slipped under her door that read, "You can't erase me." One night she came home to find her front door unlocked. Inside, nothing was stolen, but the air was different, thick, wrong. Her dresser drawers had been opened, her bed slightly moved, and on her pillow, a single Polaroid of her sleeping. Her chest tightened. He hadn't just been calling, he had been inside. The police took reports but offered little help. Restraining orders are just paper, and paper doesn't stop an obsessed man. It was a rainy Thursday when he finally snapped. Sarah had just gotten home, groceries in hand, when she heard a crash, the sound of her living room window shattering. She dropped the bags, heart pounding, as her ex climbed through the broken glass, eyes wide, face twisted with something between rage and love. "You made me do this," he whispered. "We're supposed to be together." Sarah ran for the door, but he caught her by the hair and yanked her back. She fought, clawed at his face, but he shoved her to the ground, straddling her, his hands around her throat. Her vision blurred, her lungs screamed. And as the room darkened, she thought, this is how it ends. Not with a ghost, not with a stranger, but with the man I once loved. But survival isn't always strength. Sometimes it's instinct. With the last of her energy, she drove her knee up hard. He screamed, loosened his grip, and she crawled toward the kitchen. Her hand found the first weapon she could grab, a cast-iron skillet. The sound of metal against skull rang through the apartment. He collapsed, dazed. Sarah ran barefoot and bleeding. She sprinted down the hall, screaming for help. A neighbor opened their door, pulled her inside, and called 911. Minutes later, police dragged her ex out of the apartment. He was still bleeding, still muttering her name, as if this was just another fight between lovers. But the officers had seen enough. His bag contained rope, duct tape, and another Polaroid camera. He hadn't come to talk. He had come to take Sarah survived, but she said survival was only the beginning. For months afterward, every noise outside her window sent her into panic. Every shadow in her apartment made her stomach twist. Even with him locked away, she lived like he was still there, crouched in the dark, waiting. And maybe that's the cruelest part of stalker stories. Even when the stalker is gone, the fear remains. The obsession lingers in the victim's mind, whispering, "What if he comes back?" Sarah's words stayed with me. "He broke into my home once. That's all it takes. Now I'll never feel like home is mine again." And that's the truth. Locks can be replaced, numbers can be changed, but once someone decides you belong to them, no wall feels thick enough. Sarah's story is proof that obsession doesn't always stay outside. Sometimes it shatters the glass and climbs inside. And if you ever find yourself asking, "Am I being paranoid?" remember this, so did she, until the night paranoia wasn't enough. Silence, then a single whisper. Mine. Psychological aftermath. When the police reports are filed, when the arrests are made, when the doors are locked and the stalkers are gone, you'd think the nightmare is over. But that's the cruelest truth about stalking. It doesn't end when they're caught. It doesn't end when you move houses, change numbers, or pack your life into boxes. For many victims, the real horror begins afterward, because even when the stalker is gone, the fear remains. Ask survivors and they'll tell you the same thing. I never feel alone in my own home anymore. It's not the physical scars that last. It's the second guessing, the hyper-awareness, the shadows that follow them long after. Every footstep behind them on the street makes their chest tighten. Every unknown number that flashes on their phone sends their heart racing. Every knock at the door feels like the beginning of something they barely escaped once before. One victim said it best. The scariest part wasn't when he was watching me. The scariest part was realizing I'd never know when it might start again. Psychologists call it hypervigilance. The brain rewires itself after trauma, always on guard, always searching for danger, even when there is none. Victims describe waking in the middle of the night, convinced someone is standing in the corner of their bedroom. They walk through their apartments with knives in hand just to check closets. They move curtains a dozen times a night. And the cruel twist? Sometimes they're right. Stalkers are notorious for returning, changing tactics, testing boundaries. For victims, paranoia isn't paranoia at all. It's survival. One woman in Texas thought she was finally free after her stalker was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She moved cities, changed her job, stopped using social media. But on the second week in her new apartment, she came home to find a single flower taped to her door. No card, no note, just a flower. Her stalker wasn't supposed to be out yet, but flowers don't tape themselves. Whether it was him or someone else didn't matter. In her mind, the message was clear. You'll never escape me. From that night on, she slept with her lights on, her phone in hand, her dresser shoved against the door. She said, "I used to love flowers. Now every time I see one, I feel sick." Many victims don't even tell their stories. They bury them, hoping silence will protect them. But silence is its own prison. A man who survived a stalker in his 20s admitted that he still can't sit near windows at night. He won't let anyone take his picture. He doesn't answer phone numbers he doesn't recognize. He told me, "I feel like I'm still living by his rules even though he's gone. I survived, but I didn't get my life back. Not really." That's the cost stalking leaves behind. Not just the fear of being watched, but the loss of normal life, the loss of trust, the loss of peace. And maybe the worst scar of all is this: stalkers don't look like monsters. They look like anyone. a neighbor mowing his lawn, a coworker asking how your weekend was, a classmate who seems too friendly. Victims say the hardest part is knowing they'll never see people the same way again. That smile at the grocery store could be harmless, or it could be the first page in another nightmare. One victim put it simply, "The stalker made me believe the world is full of shadows, even in daylight." You're about to hear the final chapter in this series of stalker stories. But for the victims, there is no last chapter. They move houses, they change jobs, they rebuild their lives. But every bump in the night, every unknown call, every shadow behind them on a quiet street brings it all flooding back. And that's why stalker stories will always be scarier than fiction. Ghosts vanish at dawn, monsters belong in movies, but stalkers, they leave scars you can't see. Scars that whisper, it's not over. It could start again at any moment. So remember this. It doesn't take violence to destroy someone's peace. It doesn't take a break-in, a knife, or even a word. Sometimes all it takes is a pair of eyes in the dark, a silent figure who never stops watching. And when you ask survivors what they fear most, they don't say the attacks, they don't say the chases, they say this: I fear the silence, because silence means they're watching, and I don't know when they'll step out again. Warning to the viewer. By now you've heard the stories. The neighbor who never left, the digital shadow, the obsession that turned violent, the aftermath that never ends. But here's the truth that should keep you awake tonight. Stalker stories are not rare. They don't just happen in movies or on the news. They happen in quiet suburbs, in crowded cities, on lonely country roads. And the scariest part, they happen to people who never thought it could be them. You lock your doors, you close your blinds, you tell yourself, I'm safe in here. But every victim you've just heard once said the same thing. Safety is an illusion when someone decides you belong to them. A stalker doesn't need to break a lock when they've already broken into your routine. They learn your schedule, they memorize your routes, they study the way you walk, the places you shop, the people you talk to. And by the time you notice the pattern, by the time your stomach whispers that something isn't right, they're already inside your life. Most people imagine stalkers as hooded strangers lurking in shadows. But that's almost never the case. Research shows the majority of stalkers are not strangers at all. They're exes, neighbors, classmates, co-workers, people you've shaken hands with, smiled at, maybe even trusted. That's why victims are caught off guard. Because obsession doesn't announce itself with a mask. It shows up in familiar faces, kind gestures, a wave across the street, and when it finally reveals itself, it's too late to pretend it was harmless. Maybe it's someone who likes every single photo you post within seconds. Maybe it's a coworker who always seems to leave work at the same time as you. Maybe it's a car you've noticed behind you 2, 3, 4 times in 1 week. Harmless? Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe it's the first page of your own stalker story. Victims say the same thing. I thought I was being paranoid. I didn't want to seem dramatic. But paranoia doesn't mean you're wrong. It means your instincts are trying to protect you. And in stalker stories, ignoring instincts can be fatal. Every victim has a moment they remember as the point of no return. The night everything changed. For some, it was the first time they found their door unlocked. For others, it was the first threatening note, the first shadow in their yard, the first photo slipped into their mailbox. For you, it could be tonight, it could be tomorrow, it could be the moment you realize the footsteps behind you have followed you for 3 blocks. The cruel truth is this: you never know when curiosity becomes obsession, when watching becomes following, when silence becomes breaking glass. And even if they're caught, even if they're locked away, the hook remains. Victims never stop scanning crowds for familiar faces. They never stop checking their locks twice, 3 times, 4. They never stop wondering, what if he's back? What if someone else takes his place? That's why stalker stories never truly end. Because the scars are invisible but permanent. You can move houses, change names, delete your past, but you'll always carry the question, am I being watched right now? So here's the warning. Look around you. Who knows your routines? Who knows when you leave for work, when you come home, when you post online? When was the last time you saw that same face in a crowd twice? When was the last time you convinced yourself the car behind you was just coincidence? Stalkers don't choose victims at random. They choose people who make it easy. Do you overshare online? Do you always walk home alone? Do you laugh off the coworker who asks too many personal questions? Every victim once told themselves the same thing you're thinking now. That could never happen to me. But someone, somewhere is already watching. Maybe it's harmless, maybe it's curiosity, or maybe it's the beginning. The beginning of texts you don't remember giving your number for. The beginning of notes slipped under your door. The beginning of a nightmare you won't wake up from. So tonight, when you turn off this video, when you close your blinds and check your locks, remember this: stalkers don't need an invitation. All they need is a moment. And you'll never know which moment will be the one that changes everything.